From TLDR News, this is Too Long Didn't Read. Hello and welcome to the TLDR News podcast, Too Long Didn't Read. I'm joined here today by Zach.
Hello.
And Ben.
Hello.
You're so far out of sync for us.
It's unbelievable.
I'm hoping it's fine for the listeners, but you are on such a delay today.
I know.
But we'll try and make it work. Sorry. So, lots happened since we last spoke. None of us, I think I'm safe in saying none of us are members of the European Union anymore. Like, personally, none of us are citizens anymore.
Nope.
No one has like a secret passport that I'm not aware of.
I might have one somewhere.
Somewhere hidden away. But as far as we know, none of us are European citizens anymore.
Nope.
Brexit has officially happened. It happened on Friday night.
Yeah.
We didn't end up going to the celebration in Parliament Square. There was talk of Zach and I heading down. I think having seen it on like the news and stuff,
I don't think we missed much.
We would have had to be there so early, and like I don't know what happened. I mean, I watched it, but like I don't think we missed anything. Let's say.
So
that.
you and Jonathan Bartley didn't do your little band, Zach, unfortunately.
No,
there's time yet. I don't think that was the opening event. We should lead with a friendlier crowd. To be honest with you.
Build up.
Yeah. It's already difficult to do your first gig and to do it in front of a hateful audience. Not that I'm saying that was hateful is the wrong word. I almost want to take that back immediately.
As in anti-Jonathan Bartley's going to
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's going to be some tension there.
Exactly my point. But yeah, what do we all think of Johnson's speech? To start there, because for some reason I had in my mind, and I should know this as this being my job, but like in my mind I was still expecting Johnson to do like a real speech. And I was shocked. I saw the one at 10 o'clock, the one on Facebook, and I was like, oh, interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what he says at 11. And then like I was watching the news, I was like, oh, he's not going to say anything at 11. That was the speech.
Was there a reason for that, do we know? Or just...
I think, no, not an official one. I think the obvious reason is like, they don't want it to seem too celebratory. They want to be like inclusive of everyone. They don't want it to look like a big celebration. And probably also, so it's like the optics of it, and also I reckon they're just a bit scared about what Johnson would say, like going off script and stuff. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to be concerned about.
And it is one of their new talking points about how they're going to make Brexit a thing of the past.
Exactly,
something that's happened.
So him coming out, doing a big speech after the countdown, all that kind of stuff.
It doesn't help.
And even the countdown was turned down from what I heard. Apparently it was meant to be a more fancy light show, and then in the end it was really boring. I'm assuming you both saw it.
No, I did not see it.
Just a countdown on the wall.
I just watched the brilliant
I've seen
TLDR
clips of it.
Well, you've seen enough of it then, yeah. But like fairly underwhelming, I would say. I'd definitely say the one in Parliament Square was much more exciting. Yeah. Anyway, though, I asked you what you thought, and then I just kept talking. So let's go back to when I asked you what you thought. What do you think of Johnson's speech on Facebook, if you can call it a speech? Pre-recorded message.
Yeah, what? I don't know. What does this mean? Is it sort of a new era of digital politics sort of thing?
Yeah.
You know, that sort of very downplayed, super relaxed.
Yeah.
Not quite bumbling, but you know what I mean. Like, it wasn't like statesman-like at all.
I'd say it was almost less bumbling than if it had been live, though.
Yeah,
like, I feel like it was more polished than a normal Johnson speech.
Yeah.
But you're right, he was just sat in the corner of Downing Street. I spent longer than I'd like to admit trying to work out which room he was in, because obviously we went fairly recently.
Wow.
But I was trying to work out which room he was in, and I failed. I couldn't work it out. But yeah, no, it was certainly an unusual move. Also, love the boomer move of putting it on Facebook. Like, love that. Weird it wasn't on like all of the social platforms.
I didn't know.
Odd to pick out Facebook, but I guess they're assuming everyone's got Facebook, whereas they don't all have like Twitter and whatever. But
I think.
Any thoughts on that, Ben? Any thoughts on the speech itself?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the interesting things was that he kind of spoke to, I think he said something like, I'm speaking to what I think is the biggest group, the people who just want this to be done with and finished and all this. And it seems to be something that he did, it's sort of a similar move to what he did in the election, like trying to play to this sort of middle group, or this sort of... not his core supporters. He's not speaking directly to Brexiteers. He kind of addresses the people who just want this to be over. And it was the same in the election afterwards, where he was like, I'm speaking now to the people who kind of reluctantly voted for me and those that didn't really want to vote Conservative but just wanted to get this done with. Like, he seems to keep wanting to speak to those people. So I think if we're looking into that a little bit, I think that's kind of good that he's trying to look into not just appeasing one side. He's not just looking at, I'm so glad this is done. It's a win for all the people who voted for Brexit. He's going, this is good for all the people who just want this to be over. I think that's kind of an interesting thing that he's doing, and he's not just playing to his sort of core supporters.
Do you reckon that's because he thinks he doesn't have a majority in his core supporters? Well, he knows he doesn't, probably. When you look at the stats, we actually retweeted a poll that was done on Brexit Day, and showed that a majority of people thought that Brexit would be damaging for the UK. And then I can't remember the exact stats, but fairly similar numbers thought it would be good and didn't know. It was definitely a fairly significant minority of people who thought that Brexit was still actively good for the UK. And equally, potentially it's a bit of a distraction technique. I certainly think it is, in the way that you're saying, oh, these people don't really care, everyone's over it. And it plays into what Zach was saying a minute ago of trying to make Brexit a thing of the past, move on from it, say, like, just projecting the point again that no one cares anymore, we've moved past it, even if it's not true of the majority.
So you think it's not true? You think he's pushing a lie?
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily a lie.
No, but
maybe
what I mean.
he thinks it's true.
I see what you mean.
But I certainly think it's a good use of, like, pushing the narrative forward of no one cares, stop talking about it, move on. Not explicitly saying, like some people do, you lost, stop talking about it, but like it's kind of that continued narrative of you lost, you won, we need to stop arguing about this, we need to move on. And maybe that's a good thing, we want to be unified at some point again. But equally, Brexit isn't really done. I mean, I know that in like technicalities we've moved on, but like there's still so much to happen now that sweeping it under the carpet and saying like we're done, everyone wants this to be over with, feels like a bit disingenuous.
Yeah, I don't think it's well, maybe, but I don't think it's a political move in the direction you're thinking. I don't think it's like a sort of let's shut up the Remainers and let's get, push this rejoin movement off into the abyss. I think it was more just that he knows it's his best look, and to start essentially appealing to a wider slice of the electorate, he wants to get the whole Brexit thing done. I don't think it's necessarily to push out that section that still wants Brexit to be a possibility that might be overturned. Anyway, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as I always say, it's difficult to understand exactly why someone's done something. It's difficult to understand like what his reasoning is. But ultimately, I think it's down to interpretation and framing. Like, I don't think... I think we can agree that he didn't at least sort of deliberately, or it didn't come across as apparent that the framing that he used was a sort of, right, we're fine, we're done, Brexiteers have won, Remainers have lost, let's crack on. I think the framing that he used was sort of the majority of people just want Brexit done, let's move on. Now, the reason for him doing so... I don't think you... Yeah, that can be debated, and there's no clear way, but the only thing that I can really say is that I think it was clear that he's trying to move on from Brexit. What the reasons are behind that, that's completely up for interpretation.
And I don't think he's wrong in that. I think there is a huge percentage of the public who do want to move on from it. And I'm not saying that he's wrong in that analysis, or that he was explicitly saying, let's move on, let's stop talking about it. I just more meant that we're playing into the continued kind of like notion that we need to move past it and this isn't an issue anymore. Also, I just looked up the stats. I possibly slightly downplayed the number of people who thought we'd be better off outside the EU. It was 38%, but even still, it's a fair way away from the majority.
Who's it from?
Yeah,
it's a Survation poll.
Right.
So, pretty reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a poll of our viewers, that it's like a... Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Also, people I know this is a classic Ben Railroad, but in the live stream we did at the weekend, I mentioned briefly that we did a poll and the majority, or that our highest, like our plurality of viewers are Conservative voters, and a lot of people got very upset about that.
That can't be true. It
is true. Certainly, of the survey we did, the survey was based on Discords. You're then like taking a small section of an already smaller section, but they are our most engaged viewers, presumably. But yeah, very slightly our largest party is Conservative, but it was something like 2-3% more Conservative than Labour. Like, it was really close.
No, but nonetheless, I'm surprised by that.
I was also surprised by that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, just to touch on that, to actually give some more context. Not that anyone's listening to this that also watched the live stream, but just a bit more polling news.
Yeah, I was going to say, because obviously I know you did the live stream, but I didn't have a chance to watch it all.
Yeah.
What was sort of the majority opinion? What was the majority opinion? Because you were asking them about what happened on, us leaving and their opinions on that, from what I understand. So what was the majority sort of opinion on that? What were most people saying when they called in?
So if I took purely the UK viewers, because everyone who was outside the UK obviously had like a different opinion, and we had kind of a different conversation, hearing like what their country thinks, and generally they're more likely to be pro-EU and whatever anyway. But if we're just talking about British people, I'd say the majority were probably Remain-leaning. I think the majority of people were a bit upset. But even amongst the Remain-leaning people, there are a good few people that were like, I don't think this is the right thing to do still. I've not changed my mind since Brexit Day, since the vote, sorry. But I'm glad it's happened finally, and I'm glad we can like start talking about the next stages. So I'd say probably the majority of people were Remain-leaning, but definitely not the majority of people said when I asked them how they were feeling about it, said they're upset or annoyed or any like angry, sad emotion. They were generally, most people were like more determined to move on from this.
So you think that was sort of that was sort of shows the group of people that Boris Johnson was trying to speak to in that section of his speech on Friday then. So that kind of shows that there is a significant portion of people who are just sort of let's move on from this.
But I'd say that there were very few of those people who didn't care about the outcome and weren't still more pro-EU. I'd say most people who were saying that were also saying, I wish we were staying. I want to have a closer relationship going forward. So it's not that they don't care anymore. It's just they want to move past the current debate we're having.
Yeah.
I will also say, yes, definitely. There definitely were some people that fell in that category who were kind of over it. And obviously put it better than that themselves. But they were pretty much just happy to be moving on, kind of done with the debate, wanting to move on as a country. There definitely was that group of people there, but it was far from the majority.
I think that's something that people seem to forget quite a lot whenever they're talking about Brexit and in politics. They assume that everyone's really, really into politics because you almost get in like a bubble. And you forget that this, we voted to leave 4 years ago. We've had 2 general elections in that time. Some really, some quite high profile European Union, European Parliament elections, things like that. And usually people are used to like an election every 5 years. That's as stipulated in the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Like, it's an insane amount of politics for normal that's been going on. And people seem to think that everyone's as into politics as everybody is that's talking about politics, and I think people seem to forget that that's not the case. So I can understand that portion that go, look, we voted for this 4 years ago, let's just move on. But then obviously the criticism, and something I think I was criticised a while ago in the comments on this podcast, was like, you need to get it right. Like you can't just leave and haphazardly do it as quickly as possible. It needs to, it's got serious implications. So I can see both interpretations, but it's just something that people seem to forget, is that people aren't as interested. Or maybe they are as interested, but people don't deal with politics on the level that people who talk about politics do all the time. It's just not. So I can understand that interpretation anyway.
Also, it's worth saying that one, this isn't a fair representation of our audience because it was only the people who happened to get through.
Yeah.
2, it was only the people who happened to be watching at the time we were doing it.
Yeah.
3, it was people who already subscribed to our channel, so that shows a certain level of interest. And 4, they then like put themselves out of their way and put themselves on like a platform to voice their opinion, so they're likely to have more of an opinion. So me saying only a few people didn't care, it's probably also because the people who didn't care didn't phone in, because why would they?
Yeah, that's true.
And they probably weren't watching in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a great representation. But it was interesting to speak to people. It was good to hear some opinions.
So where were you both at 11 p.m? Did you hear any? Because I was at home in Nottingham and I heard fireworks going off at 11 on Friday. I was wondering did you come across any celebrations? Did you hear any of that? Like what was it like?
Yeah, I think we heard fireworks, but they were definitely
Wait,
so
were you
far
here?
away.
Were you in the office? Or?
No, I was at home.
At home.
I think I heard fireworks, but it was definitely far enough away that it wasn't obvious. And there were also some people like shouting a little bit, but again, that sounded far away, and it was like, is that just like a more main road? And they're just like, it was like 11 o'clock at night. It's hard to tell the difference between like people drunk and going out and like people happy about Brexit. So I'd say no, there was there's nothing I could point to that was like people obviously celebrating.
Yeah, no. I didn't get anything interesting.
But you got fireworks, did you say?
I did, yeah, I heard them, yeah, here.
But nearby, or just like some big celebration fireworks in a park?
No, nearby. It wasn't big celebration ones. It was, I presume, just somebody in his back garden doing it. But Yeah. So that was.
Well,
that
someone
was
had a good night.
Yeah. Evidently, yeah. So no.
And to be fair, people have been waiting for a long time for this. Some people, the people who've been engaged for a long time, and admittedly, there's not many of those people because I've said this loads in the last few weeks. But like the fact that only about 3% of people cared about this issue 20 years ago. The people who are those 3%, fair enough, they've been fighting for this for a really long time.
Yeah.
So when people say that they shouldn't be celebrating, I am a bit like, that's a bit of a spoil sport attitude. Like, I get maybe you shouldn't be rubbing it in people's faces and stuff, but if I'd been working on something for 20 years and it was like a big political purpose of mine, I'd want to be happy that it had finally happened.
Yeah.
So
Nigel.
if I was Nigel, fair play to him, he can be happy. But like... Susan, who only got involved 10 minutes ago. Sorry?
Do you see his portrait?
His portrait? No.
Yeah, I
No
saw
one's
his
seen this.
portrait.
Nigel
Yeah.
Farage's got a portrait done of himself.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that's a...
He unveiled it himself as well, didn't he?
When?
Yeah, he did. It's... I don't know. I just as a politician, I'm a bit of a fan of Nigel. I think he's done he's done amazingly well. But that was just a bizarre thing to do. Like,
Nigel Farage portrait. Oh, here we go.
there you go.
Found the video. I hope there's like the video is of him unveiling it. I want to see like the flourish he does.
While
I'm
everyone
watching an
else is
advert at the moment.
Yeah,
so
well,
keep
while everyone else is
talking.
talking about it's interesting to see how much, because we've talked about this a lot, but it'll be interesting to see how much Brexit dominates the next year or so of news, and whether or not we still call it Brexit. Do you know what I mean? Like, as to how well Johnson can do his whole let's forget about Brexit. Because it is still front page stuff the whole time. And the fact that we've already seen cracks appearing in even the last couple of weeks between the UK and the EU about what sort of trading relationship they want.
I think if anything, the most interesting stuff is still yet to come.
Oh, yeah,
Certainly the most
I completely
consequential
agree.
stuff.
Yeah.
Whether the media will still care and whether people will
That's
still
the
care, I think is
question.
a different question.
Exactly.
But I don't know if they... I don't know. It's really hard to tell
I
because
think
there's
they
some
will.
issues that people... Like the fact that people talk about the fishing industry all the time and it's like less than 1% of GDP. Like, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's like a tiny percentage of the UK like economy. And yet it's one of those issues people get really excited about. So it will be interesting... Is that something people will still care about or people move on? I don't know.
Yeah.
I reckon definitely for the next few weeks, it will still be like right up there in conversation because we'll be getting into negotiations in March and so on.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end, presuming there's not a deal like on the table and sorted by August, like the autumn winter time is going to be a big time again because we're going to have the whole discussion around, are we going to leave without a deal? Presuming we don't extend, we've got like a hard deadline there. So
I'm really fascinated because I think we will end up leaving with some sort of hard deal.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, some.
I don't know if it's even possible to leave unless we're going to extend.
No, you can't.
It's not possible in the time frame.
And I also don't think the sort of the vital minimum that the EU have been talking about will not be what the UK goes for.
No.
Like conformance and on standards and stuff like that. I think we're really interested to see whether or not that's essentially blamed on Brexit. Like if we essentially have a no deal. A no deal. I'm going to say the word Brexit, but
Yeah, well, it kind of is a no deal Brexit.
I know, but if we have that
Yeah.
at the end of 2020, how will that be reported? Will that get away with being like, oh, we had some sort of independent trade negotiation with the EU that's not quite Brexit related? Do you see what I mean?
It depends how major it is. If it's the kind of thing that like industry leaves the UK, companies leave the UK, people are suddenly like having to apply for visas. I mean, they already do for settled status, but like if there's major changes to people's lives, I think it will get noticed. Whereas if it's only minor things, then maybe less so. Also, it depends on the kind of deal. It's not going to happen in the time frame, but if they went for something really soft, I can't imagine much of the media letting them get away with that. You'd have like angry fishermen and stuff.
You think, so they'd be angry fishermen in that case. But do you think, for example, what do you think the plausibility of Johnson falling back onto some and getting away with it, falling back on some sort of soft Brexit?
Low. I don't think he can do it, just technically in like the time frame.
You don't think he's already cashed in the political credit for getting Brexit done?
Maybe. It depends how soft we're talking.
This is my question: I don't know because he's had his fair share of champagne recently.
Completely.
And I just don't know if that is permanent champagne or temporary champagne. You see what I mean?
I think it comes back to what we were talking about a second ago. I think the people who are engaged and have always cared about this issue, if he then rows back and goes for something much softer, they're going to be furious. And I mean,
but do you think
rightfully so? I think
media will translate that back into
Well, that's the question.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's the question
that's when you get back to does average dude on the street who's only cared since the referendum.
But the average dude on the street has cared so far. Like,
yes.
cue the election. So will the average dude on the street still care come 2020?
I guess it depends how significant. There's certain industries and certain parts of the deal which I think will matter more than others. I think things like financial services, as important as they are for the UK economy, unless there's something huge happening there, it's really hard to get excited about that for a lot of people. Whereas there's other things which have like more visible effects that I think people will care about more. But again, it depends. It's a scale. If we're talking about something really soft, then yeah, no, definitely you won't get away with that. But if we're talking about something more moderate, something more middle of the road than what he's talking about at the moment, I reckon he could slip that under the radar. Especially as I reckon a decent percentage of people will have kind of checked out of the debates by a certain point now.
Okay, yeah.
They'll be happy that Brexit's happened, and now they're like, well,
I've
we
got
did
an
it.
example. Here's this can nail it down slightly more. Let's say that push comes to shove. Obviously, we can't sort out a comprehensive Canada trade deal before 2020. We resort back to something more Norway style, maybe very limited de-alignment on customs and maybe some standards and regulation stuff, but we're still under essentially ECJ rules. Yeah. Do you think he gets away with that at the end of 2020? And by get away with that, I mean, like, how big are the political repercussions for him?
I reckon fairly significant. I do.
Okay.
I don't think it will be catastrophic. I still don't think that would really shift that much, especially with projecting forward to 2024 at like the next election. I'm not sure we're going to be still talking about it then. If that happens,
that's why
we're not going to be pointing back and say Brexit has lost this for him. People are still angry about that. But I reckon there will be repercussions. I think there'll still be negative stories about it. I still think there'll be a percentage of the people who are angry with him.
So do you think then when that choice has to be made, when Johnson comes to the point where he has essentially go for some sort of closer alignment, avoid having to put up border infrastructure and all that, or Canada, what do you think he goes for?
I mean, it's hard because it's hard to untangle from the just logistics of it and like the time frame and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a decent argument to be made that with Johnson's history with Brexit, with the EU and that kind of thing, that he might want to go for a more moderate, softer option. You can see the argument for like how he'd end up there. Whether he will or not, who knows? I think we'll end up with something harder, definitely on the harder end of the spectrum.
Because I think that the next sort of 11 months are a foregone conclusion, maybe 10 months.
Yes.
I think so. You have the very limited stuff sorted out by mid 2019, so June, July, and you have stuff
2020, you mean?
2020. So it's just like on the fisheries, and you have to have some financial service stuff sorted out by then.
Got to,
and maybe they have to sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol, so what precisely gets checked. So I think that happens. I think we pass over the deadline for which Johnson can ask for an extension, because so for people who don't know, he has to ask for an extension transition period by mid 2020.
End of June,
Yeah, exactly. So I have a feeling that he'll feel like the 2020 deadline itself is far enough away that he can't be asked really to ask for that extension, and it'll be fine in the end. I feel like that would, if we're talking about things he'd get kicked back for, pushing that I think is probably the worst thing he could do. I mean, not as bad as repeal. I mean, he can't repeal Article 50 now. Not as bad as like writing a letter to the EU and being like, we want to come back, but like pretty close to that. I reckon people will be furious. Yeah, so that's what I mean. That's what I think. That whole bit's a foregone conclusion, which means that we get to the point in late, because apparently
we'll still make a video about it though. There'll still be a video on the channel. Will there be an extension? The answer will be no.
No, there won't be.
But we'll still make the video.
Yeah, so we get to that point, and then we go another few months, and I think it's supposed to be legally impossible for him to ask for an extension at that point.
Yes.
But I do think that it's not one of those things where he can go, from what I understand, he can't go last minute, oh, please, could I have an extension? No. I really just need it. So there's no extension on the table. There is a hard deadline in December 2020. And then, like, that's the point that, you get to November. That's really the crunch time.
Yeah.
You don't have a comprehensive Canada-style free trade agreement. That's an assumption, obviously, but chances are
unlikely.
Yeah. And then so you have two options. One, you take whatever the EU's offering, which will likely be something like Norway, with still ECJ oversight and stuff like that. Or you plough ahead with your limited vital minimum Canada-style free trade thing, which probably ends up being a logistical nightmare. And I just think that's the interesting question about which way he goes. And so, I've got a fucking 10-month wait to find out.
It's going to be quite a while.
Yeah.
And that's, again, also the question of, like, how much people care about this. I think that's why it will ramp back up towards the end of the year.
And the other thing to bear in mind as well is, I think you touched on this, Jack, is to do with, the next election is until 2024. So when you say get away with it, like, at this point, pretty much anything. Like, people's memories in politics is pretty short. Like, I really don't think that, no matter how, post-transition period goes, I don't think there's much that is going to be so damaging that it's going to affect the next election.
Also, it's so far away. You're talking about like so many variables between now and then. Like, we're assuming Johnson will still be Prime Minister at the next election. Yeah. It's likely he will be, but it's not even guaranteed. In which case, the next person could do what he did in this election and say, we're going to be a new kind of Conservative Party, or voting for change, even though we've already been in power for 9 years.
We should sit on that for a bit. He's done that phenomenally well.
Unbelievably well.
It really does. I must have fallen for it because it feels like a new Conservative Party.
No, but it's the same people.
Well, it's not.
Not the same exactly, but it's like the same like structure. It's
the same.
When you're talking about like CCHQ, like it's the same.
Yeah.
The people facing like on the news are changed, but
they have changed out all the big names.
True.
Like all those big names you used to see the whole time, like they've just all gone. Like Sajid Javid is the new face of the Conservative Party, and it's just a bit confusing. Everyone apart from Boris Johnson from that old
To be fair,
guard.
they have been since the summer. Like it's
been a gradual process, definitely. But it still feels a bit weird. Like, I still feel in the immediate consciousness when you say the word Conservative Party, I still sort of think David Cameron, George Osborne, Ian Duncan Smith, maybe Michael Gove, and they're no longer really...
No, true.
Yeah. Amber Rudd, Ken Clark, and they're just all sort of...
All of them are fading away.
They've been properly just kicked out.
But no, it was very successful. I mean, it's a difficult argument to make after 9 years in government that you're a change.
I know.
But he clearly managed to do it.
Yeah.
Easier when you've got Corbyn in front of you, but
definitely.
Nonetheless, it's still very impressive.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say on this, Ben? Because if not, I want to talk about Farage's painting.
I'm happy to
I've been
talk
looking
about
at it for the last
painting.
like 20 minutes.
Yeah, go on.
Are we meant to think this is a good painting? What's been the coverage of this painting? Do people think it's terrible? Because what's up with his mouth?
I don't think there's been. I'm not going to lie. I don't think there's been a huge amount of coverage of this because there's been other things going on.
Really.
But I agree.
There's something
the mouth,
like really carpy looking about the mouth. Like the mouth looks so fishy.
He is quite carpy looking though.
But also just like the ring around his mouth. Like that's not there in real life.
There must be a style of portrait. I agree that there's something a little bit off with that. But I think it's not supposed to be hyper realist.
No, clearly not.
No, but you know what I mean. So.
But like, I love like his reaction to it. The fact he just looks at it for a bit. Do you reckon he's genuinely never seen it before? We're watching this.
Do you think he's actually slightly disappointed?
Yeah, I think. I'm watching it without audio and without the knowledge of has he seen it before. But he looks at it for a bit too long to be happy with it. Yeah, and then like when you look at his reaction in a second, like he's too happy. Like that's too happy. Like that's not genuine happy.
The other question I have for this,
he looks disappointed by that.
He does, and I would be if I was drawn like that. I would be too.
Well,
no offense to the artist. Like, you're right, it's a stylistic thing, it's personal preference. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of style of art anyway, but...
The carpfish mouth style of
I would
art.
be upset about the face.
How frequent is it? Yeah, how frequent is it for people to unveil their own portraits in that way anyway? I understand, like, major politicians, when it's, like, for a special occasion, you'll do it, but...
We should all do it.
Well, you've just described... Nigel Farage is a major politician in a special occasion.
But where's that going? Where's the painting? What I mean is, if it's being like unveiled and hung at the National Portrait Gallery,
I think it is, or somewhere like that.
Then I understand. But like, is that what that is, or is it just a bit of art that he's selling?
No, I think it's. I thought in the article somewhere I saw it was going somewhere.
Right. Okay.
I'm making this up. I've got no idea. I'm pretty sure it's going somewhere.
Everyone go look at the picture of Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do.
Watch the video too, I'd say.
And
also, we should do that for like a milestone episode. Get some viewers to like draw pictures of us. Like not professional artists at all. I want like complete amateurs and we have to unveil them with a straight face.
Oh, okay.
That would be terrible.
Is this before or after we do the... Yeah, I was going to say, is this...
Before,
we've had so many crazy ideas on this podcast. I mean, they're just stacking up, and I don't know which one's happening. And
this one's not crazy. This one's perfectly doable.
Also, we did actually do some of them. Like we did the Dams and Jam one.
Yeah.
We did, actually, yeah.
God, that fucking live stream was a disaster.
It was indeed.
It's complete. I always get so embarrassed when people, because I advertised it on my Facebook, and people who don't listen to the channel, it's the only thing they've seen of it. So they've done, I did this thing, and they looked at it. It's just 3 guys huddled around 2 mics eating Dams and jam.
Yeah.
I got texts from people who don't give a fuck about politics being like, this is terrible content.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But we're working on it.
Anyway, let's move on. But have you got anything on your list of topics, Ben?
Loads.
Didn't you really
Can we talk about school
loads.
uniforms?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
please.
you had something you were passionate about.
Yeah, I do. So, it's related to something I'm passionate about. So anyway, I saw a thing pop up on my phone the other day saying that there's going to be a law going through. It's a backbench. It's a public bill. So backbench bill going through from a Labour MP, Mike Amesbury, which is to do with the cost of school uniforms. So. I don't know how much people know about how school uniforms work, but schools set them, and
I'm going to completely agree with you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you
a
too.
lot of people,
so I don't think it's going to be that interesting, but I haven't heard the article yet, so go for it.
Yeah, so in the UK, the schools generally will set like a uniform, and it'll be something very specific to the school, so that you can't buy it from Tesco or a retailer. You've got to get it from the school, and that means that school uniforms generally are quite expensive. Now, in the article that I'm reading, they say that the average cost for a secondary school is £340 for the
That is
uniform.
extravagant.
That sounds about right. I'm not surprised by that.
No, neither am I, but it's nonetheless extravagant.
Yeah, it is a lot of money, especially if you've got like a few kids.
Well, that's what they were saying.
If
Like,
you have multiple kids and you put them in private school, I don't know how you do it.
But even if you're not,
if you're not in private school,
yeah.
No,
but the people who are in private school, it's like
it's next level.
If you're doing that already, you're fine. Like you're not complaining about £300 quid.
I have a horror story. It's going to make me sound exceptionally posh, but like, Go
for it. You can't back out now. We're not editing this out.
I can't back out now. Fair enough. I went to a private primary school, and they used to have to pick up your uniform from Harrods.
wow.
Yeah.
No.
Fucking next level.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
that,
I'm
we're
not sure
assuming
this
that's
article is
slightly
about
above
you
the average,
specifically.
then, isn't it? The cost.
Well, I don't even not much more than. There can't be more than the secondary school average.
Well, the average for primaries was £255. So
that's mental.
That's insane.
The 300 and whatever. It's like cool. You're wearing like ties and like blazers and stuff. But like primary school, what are you wearing?
Yeah. What is?
But I suppose it's the amount that you buy as well, isn't it? Like I suppose it's not just the
load of
true.
Yeah.
You're not just buying like one jumper, are you? Yeah.
Especially primary school kids who are like getting glue on everything.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Idiots.
finish your article and then we can discuss our.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so there was some criticism.
Yesteryear.
I'm sure you can understand where this criticism's going, which is that there were certain families who are saying that they have to take money out of their food budget on electric to pay for the cost of these uniforms over summer. And some of them, I think I read somewhere, someone compared it to, equivalent to the cost of like an extra Christmas, which when you take into account those averages, I can see, that interpretation. So yeah, there's the bill going through is just trying to limit that and to say that you can specify basic items such as trousers and shirts, but not styles. So that will obviously mean that things with logos on. That will be out, so that you can then obviously buy them from retailers, and it'll be a bit cheaper. And the reason I don't know, I've always over the last few years, I always come across these articles that. And it happens all the time. It's remarkable if you actually look into it how often this happens. People who go to school, first day of year 7, and I read somewhere, I was reading up about this just before we did the podcast, there was somewhere that had turned people away for wearing the wrong colour socks on their first day of year 7.
No,
they turned
I saw
them
this.
away.
That's unbelievable.
There were some horror
it makes me
stories
livid
about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What a horrible thing to do to a child who's like already probably fairly nervous about their first day to be turned away because their parents gave, and it's not even like it's their fault.
No,
if
exactly.
It was like higher education, it'd be like you have something to do with this. But like your parents gave you the wrong sock colour and now you can't go in with the rest of your class.
Also, it's so non-essential
Who cares?
to being taught. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Like, what lesson is that teach? Because this is the thing. I then got thinking, like, what's the lesson you're teaching them? So I suppose the lesson they're trying to teach them is when you go into the workplace, it's going to be like a strict uniform. You've got to adhere to it and all this. But I've been, I've gone on internships. I've done work. I've gone to, I worked at the council this summer. I have gone in with like a, suit on with a tie and everything. And after 2 or 3 days, I realised no one actually wears that. that. Like, you go in, maybe a smart shirt and some trousers.
No.
Like, it's not a lesson that really is that important anymore. Like, you know, it's such, and not only that, even if that was a lesson, do you know what a better lesson than that is? The lessons that you get taught in school. Like, that's a better lesson for you than being sent home for having poor uniform. It really, I don't know, that always really got to me about that. I'm really glad that bill's going through, because I don't know, who are these schools that think that that's essential? Why has nothing been done with that already? I think
there's kind of like two discussions we can have here. Firstly is like this exact bill, like stuff on really prescriptive uniform guidelines, and then the second one is like the concept of uniform as a whole, because you're kind of right. If you're talking about like, well, no, not uniform. I'm not talking about like in school specifically.
Okay, sorry.
Don't get me too like, we don't want to go too deep here. But specifically on this, I think you're right. Like, it's some of the costs are insane. Most of it doesn't matter. Even if you're in favour of uniform, why does it matter where they bought the shirt from, where they bought the trousers from? Like, as long as you're right, as long as they're the same colour, and even that within a spectrum. Yeah. Like, if you've got like dark grey versus black trousers, who cares?
What you really want is just sort of one thing that they have to buy, like a blazer or a tie.
Yes,
something that's
exactly.
cheap. It's not you don't have to buy 10 of them. You just buy,
one or two. Yeah.
And then you just say, oh, we're all doing white shirts and black trousers.
And then like, precisely. I remember the cost of blazers at my school was like, I don't know, it was like at least 100 or something. Like, it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
But like, that's only one item, and you only really need one of them. And that's also the kind of thing that I remember, like, families and stuff would pass them down, like, younger
Did you have
children.
those like things where like they do like a start of every year they do a second hand thing?
Maybe.
We used to have those, and that made it
of.
so much easier, because we used to have start of every year.
Yeah.
All the old parents would dump all their
good.
kids' clothes, and it would just
That's
make
a good
it like.
idea.
That is a good idea.
It worked so well.
Yeah. And especially if you're like, don't have other children like lower down to hand it to or whatever, or different genders or whatever. Ben, do you have any more anger about specific uniforms, or do you want to move on to like uniforms as a concept?
Well, no, I was just going to say that I looked into like, because I was always interested in specifically, do schools actually have the power, or what power do they have to actually send people home on the first day? Like, is that true? Is this common? Are they allowed to do, like, what's the rationale behind it? And apparently they kind of they'll have their own their discipline policy, and they'll say if you're like not adhering to school rules, then you can be sent home and things like that. So very technically they can, but it's like, I still don't understand. I just think that they should introduce like a one-line bill, just say, look, you can't send people home on the first day for having a little bit wrong with a uniform. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say that's discipline really. I wouldn't say that school school uniforms really discipline. It's not like advantageous. The other thing that it says is that you've got to take into account like the welfare of the kids when you're sending them home and things. And the thing that I always think is like the first day of year 7, parents who work 9 to 5, they're not able to go, it might be very difficult for them to go into school and pick them up and take them home. Like, that doesn't seem safe, or it could not be safe. For certain people,
especially when you're talking about this age group, like these are like 11 and 12 year olds, like these are pretty young.
Yeah, exactly. And going to school on your first day and then being turned around at the gate, the parents aren't accounting for that. They're at work. They might have a job where they're unreachable for certain parts of the day, and whose responsibility is it for the welfare of the kids at that point? It's obviously, from my perspective, the way I'm looking at that is that's kind of the school's responsibility, and if they can't get through to the parents, then what happens? And I don't know. All of that seems completely backwards. It seems to serve no purpose, and I can't understand how nothing's been done on that yet. The bill that's going through doesn't tackle that specifically.
Funding.
Yeah.
It is sort of auxiliary funding for schools, I suppose. I mean, that was the only argument I could find for it.
But then, like, is that a good thing in itself? Like, do you want individuals
it sort of shifts
to have
the blame, though. Do you know what I mean? It shifts the blame away from the school to the government.
When I was at school, you weren't buying it directly from the school anyway. You were buying it from like a school approved supplier. So I'm guessing they're getting some kind of kickback on that regardless. But it's not like you're exactly like buying it straight from them anyway. So they're not getting that much money, surely. I mean, I guess if you're talking £300 per pupil per whatever, like, it is still a lot of money, but. So what do you think of uniforms more generally?
I don't know. I think they're, as I said earlier, I don't think that they're as important as they used to be. I mean, in the office environment, it doesn't seem to be, and especially to the level of strictness that schools seem to stipulate. Like, they're not. I remember at our school, you had to have black trousers, not grey. Like, which workplace actually in the UK will say, yeah, you actually can only have a certain colour suit that you can wear, and you have to wear this
Funeral
specific
director.
tie. Yeah, fine, okay,
Funeral
that's a
director.
very I you know what? I'll take that, but I would argue that that's not a massive portion of the workforce.
Yeah.
And you know, if we're going to get into very specific,
Completely agree.
Yeah, it doesn't. So the majority of places will not do that, and it's kind of served its purpose up till now.
The only one that's even vaguely along those lines is if you're going something like military, army, something like that, which does have a very strict dress code some of the time, and
Absolutely.
then like sure, but
Yeah.
I mean, what are you really training someone in that they couldn't just learn when they joined the army? You're meant to wear this uniform, put these clothes on. Like, it's not like it's a difficult concept to understand. They need to be trained in for like the previous 18 years.
But not only that, there are clubs within schools that you can train for that, in which you have to wear a certain uniform for it. So if that's something that you've got to learn,
So would
you
you guys have no
Scouts or
uniform?
something.
Are we dismissing uniform entirely here?
No, I don't think so.
I'm not. I'm
Okay.
just saying the strictness is I'm dismissing. Actually having a uniform, I understand. I understand the purpose of creating an identity within the school. Getting people to dress smartly, ready for being in work. All of these things. Like I understand that. Not only that, but there's the argument of if you let people wear their own clothes, then those that can spend more money will come in with like branded clothes, and you get this sort of disparity between classes within. And I understand all of those things, and I agree with that. The bit that I don't agree with is the strictness at which that it's being implemented, and the punishment seems so disproportionate and so backwards.
Yeah.
That's the bit that I'm disagreeing with, not the concept of uniforms as a whole.
So maybe you mentioned this before, but what exactly does the bill do?
So it says the bill says that you wouldn't be able to have. It would be able to specify basic items. This is coming from the article. Schools will be told they can specify basic items such as trousers and shirts, but not styles. So the interpretation, the thing that I read from that, and the thing that supposedly the article reads from that, is that they can say you have to have like smart trousers, smart shirt, but you can't specify you've got to have this specific blazer with this specific logo on, and then charge a large amount for it.
And that's all it says.
Yeah, well, I haven't read the actual. As I say, I haven't been able to find.
No, of course.
Bill,
I was just wondering if there was anything more specific on punishments and
I think
stuff.
it's like a reasonable line to draw. I think like that is vague enough. I would happily go more vague than that. I'd happily say that like things to do with like punishments and stuff for uniform is normally too extreme. But like, there's a question of like, is that something the government needs to rule on, or is that like local authorities? Like, I feel like there's not everything needs to be done at like Westminster level.
No.
So I guess that's kind of the point. But I do completely agree with what you're saying, Ben, that I think uniform as a concept I'm fine with. I think there are a lot of benefits for it. The thing that you said that I really was also going to say was the whole thing about different types of clothing children would be wearing if they had complete free reign. And then I think you've got an even greater issue potentially than the issue you've currently got with people not being able to afford uniform, because at least that's only £310. That's a lot of money. But if you're buying like, let's say if you're wearing like different clothes every day, the minimum you'd want is like one set of clothes for like every week or two. So then you're buying like 10 outfits, and then like the cost of that is going to be greater than the cost of the uniform, especially as styles change and like children want different
but
clothes.
that's sort of a sunk cost, because you're assuming that children already have clothes that they wear.
They need a greater number though.
Yeah, but that's not much more. It's definitely.
I agree, but I think there's a definite risk there. And also, I have no issue with the concept of uniform as a whole. I think, like, who cares?
No, I think it's psychologically quite important.
Yeah,
especially
and
for little kids.
I think, true. And I think the benefits of it, as long as it's being enforced in a reasonable way, is fine. When you've got like people getting like,
I think we all agree here, essentially, though, that basically the punishments meted out are too strict, and for the most part, schools shouldn't be able to demand ridiculously tight uniform standards.
But and the one thing that I want to stress here is, it can seem like quite a trivial issue, and I can understand that. But the reason that I bring it up is because I have seen in the news over the last few years just the sheer number of these cases that come up are ridiculous. Like, this isn't like one or two schools that have been a bit ridiculous. I remember basically a while ago I did a speech competition, and I wanted to do something about that. So I looked up some of the news articles, because I ended up not actually doing it. But anyway, and I found there's so many articles of people, turning people away on the first day of year 7, turning people away, or big groups of people away because they bought something and it was down to interpretation. Like, this isn't the point that I'm making here. Is it's not as trivial as it might sound. Like,
I think the non-triviality though comes. The non-triviality comes more from the fact that it's every parent sending a kid to school that has to pay 300 quid.
Yeah.
I mean, there'll be lots of cases of that, sure. But the main thing is just that the amount of money that is being demanded of parents.
Yeah, I think there's no argument. I wasn't even for a second thinking it was trivial, because you're talking about, let's say the average family has like 2 kids, 600 quid a year. I know you're probably not buying a new uniform every year, but you're going to have to buy new shirts at some point, new trousers probably fairly regularly too.
Sum.
It's a lot of money. If you suddenly dumped on families like an extra 600 quid in tax a year, you wouldn't hear the end of it for months. They'll be processed on the street. Like, it's a good amount of money for like an average family.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. I don't think it's trivial at all. And I think the trivial part of it is like the dumb rules and stuff people are setting. But that's a different issue from what this bill's tackling.
Schools, eh?
But I remember at school we had to wear blazers every day. I don't know if you two did as well.
Yeah.
And like there was like a big deal. Yeah, I mean, private school boy. But did you go to a normal school, Ben?
I went to state school.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it.
That is discrimination, Mike.
It is discrimination,
that is disgusting.
But fine. I'm happy to take the heat for that one.
You're technically punching up. You're allowed.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we had to wear blazers every day, and like even in the summer you had to wear them every day. And it was like there was a sign that went up in school, like when you're allowed to not wear your blazer when it's like hot enough.
Oh, that's quite
I remember
cool.
there being like rumors going around, like if it was like getting hot one day, it'll be like, oh, I've heard this teacher say that they might be putting the sign up, and it was like the dumbest. And I think that was almost anti the point of uniform. I know that everyone's meant to be following it, but like it doesn't show any like flexibility. There's no workplace where they do that. There's no environment at all where they do that. And I feel like it would be more beneficial to put some responsibility on the child and be like, you can judge it for yourself. It's a blazer. Who cares?
I don't know where my anger from this comes from, to be fair, because mine was quite relaxed. I just had to, we had just a tie that you had to wear. There was jumpers that you could buy, like sweaters, but I didn't get one. I just wore a coat. So I was, I don't know where mine wasn't that strict at all. So
ours was really strict. And we used to have a teacher, and I'm tempted to call him out, but I don't know. There's nothing problematic about calling him out, is there?
If you really feel like
I'm angry.
He deserves it.
I mean, I'd advise maybe against it, but
Okay, I won't call him
call.
out. But this teacher used to go around at lunchtimes and like genuinely hide around corners. You'd watch him hide around corners until someone came around the corner with like the wrong uniform, and then jump out of them and be like, your tie's too loose, whatever, detention. Like he was trying to catch people.
That's quite sad. I always feel so sad when
and
I
I
hear
was
those
like,
stories.
is he on commission or something from the school? Like, what benefit of it? Like, he was so vigilant about it too. And every lunchtime.
Power hungry and lonely, probably.
It must be. But like that was like when it went really too far. Also, I got a detention from him for running once. And I remember being furious about that. And as you can hear from the tone of my voice, I'm still angry.
Or not really?
No, handful.
I got so few.
Yeah, mine were running, uniform once or twice, a couple of times for like homework and stuff. I used to try and work out which teachers never collected in the homework and then just not do them. And just like rule of averages, you might get like a detention or two, but like the amount of time you're saving is fine.
I love that even in school, Jack, your time management, like you try to bend the rules for just time
gaming
management.
The system.
Yeah.
And also, I was too loud in German class a lot, and I got in trouble for that too.
Yeah.
But I just didn't really like German.
Naughty boy.
But besides that, no, I was fine. I was just trying to be efficient, I think.
I remember being told off once for having my shirt untucked, and I was really annoyed because I was like, I didn't even know it was, and if I'd have known, that wouldn't have happened. Like, this isn't a choice of mine. I don't...
Yeah, the uniform one, when people used to deliberately flout the rules, I'd be like, what's the benefit to that? Just like leave it tucked in, like...
I was one of the cool kids.
What, who was deliberately flouting?
I did not deliberately flout the rules.
But it was like, I don't understand what the benefit is. Like, you're getting so little gain here for like the potential.
Cool. That's the...
But you don't look that...
You don't actually.
You're still wearing a blazer.
And you're however old you are, and you still think, okay.
Yeah, I guess. But I never bought into that.
No. I think we might have spoken about schools a bit too long there.
Does anyone have anything else they want to say? I feel like we can't do anything that important now.
No, I'm
because
actually
we're so
finished.
deep that it's like.
Yeah, I'm done.
I reckon no one who's not into schools will have made it past this point.
No, I haven't got anything.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll leave the main podcast there, but if you do want more content from us, you want to hear us talk about more serious things.
If you want to, if you want more of this.
Yeah, I know. You can head over to Patreon, patreon.com/TLDR news, where you can sign up for, I think it's the $10 and up tiers, and in return, you get bonus bits from the podcast, which will include the conversation we're about to have, answering some of your Brexit-related questions. But we haven't looked at the questions yet, so if we can't actually answer any of them, we'll probably just talk about schools more. But either way, if you want more content from us, whether that's the podcast or anything else, head over to Patreon and chuck us a bit of cash. Thanks for listening, and thank you if you do sign up for the Patreon. Do you want to say goodbye?
Oh, we said okay.
That was the end.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, see you later, everyone.